Hey y'all, it's Kathleen here. We are nearing the end of June, which means that we're nearing the end of our season. But we have good news. We'll be back in September with all new episodes of Crime Story. If you're on Spotify or Apple, hit that follow button so you'll be the first to know about our brand new season. Okay, that's all for me for now. Here's the episode. David Luis Suave Gonzalez was 17 years old when a Pennsylvania court sentenced him to spend the rest of his natural life in prison for first-degree murder. Known as Suave, he became one of the state's many juvenile lifers, basically kids sentenced to life in prison. But decades later, the unexpected happened, not just in the courts, but inside the prison between a young incarcerated man and a journalist named Maria Hinojosa. What began as a brief encounter would grow into a correspondence spanning decades. Letters, visits, phone calls, and finally, a podcast that not only traces Suave's journey out of prison, but the shifting ideas about punishment, rehabilitation, and whether anyone is truly beyond redemption. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this is Crime Story. Maria, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, this podcast is about so much, but at its core, it's about you and Suave's friendship. Can we sort of start where it started? How did you bump into this very sort of impressive person named Suave?
Well, I would actually now, in 2025, I can say that there's a friendship, but in the beginning, and actually even season 1, I'm like, I understand that we went deep into this whole issue, journalist-source relationship. We broke through the fourth wall. But I deal in honesty and radical transparency, and I'm not sure I can say that Suave and I were friends. So what happens is that in 1993, I'm a budding correspondent at National Public Radio, NPR, and I had already started my career doing youth reporting. I was going into communities that a lot of NPR reporters just didn't really think about in terms of reporting. And so I kind of was making a name for myself as somebody who understood young people who were not white, financially challenged communities, forgotten communities, abandoned neighborhoods. And so I get an invitation to go into a maximum security men's prison. So, honestly, I jumped at the chance. I was like, because at that point I had never been in a U.S. prison, maximum security prison. I had not been. And I'm a journalist. I want to go where there is darkness. And there is darkness in terms of journalists being allowed inside prisons with sunshine to see what's going on. And the prison population in this country is one of the fastest growing populations and continues to be. So it's like a journalist's dream to be able to get inside, and to get inside not necessarily with a mic, right? So you're coming in a different context. So all of it was like amazing. This opportunity, I said yes. I was a newlywed. My 6'2" Dominican husband came with me. I was wearing, honestly, an adorable dress. I was adorable. But I was walking in with my husband, but I remember, and my husband came just like, sure, I'll drive you down to central Pennsylvania. Sure, I'll come with you, because when you're newlyweds, you do that.
Yeah.
He doesn't do that now. But it was walking in that prison when I suddenly realized, oh my God, look at all of these men. They're really looking at me. And that's when I felt a little uncomfortable, but I was like, okay, it's a little eye candy, It actually, like in Mexico, we say un taco de ojo, which means an eye taco. It's a weird thing. But basically, it's like you're enjoying the taco of what you're seeing with your eyes. And so I was just like being very me. And I gave a speech that essentially said, I see you guys. I don't see you as the other. I have been in prisons before because of people that I know. and care about who were in prison. So I'm not freaked out by prison. I understand that you're in here for the worst thing that you did on the worst day of your life, for the worst decision you ever made, that most of you probably regret. So something happened in that speech, and Suave, who had been the brainchild of this all, he was the one who had heard me on NPR. He was the one who said, I think you should bring her in here. And Suave comes up to me in a sea of men who were in their jumpsuits, and they were all, many of them were telling me that they were lifers. So it's just kind of shocking. It's not one man, it's two, it's three, it's four. I'm a lifer, I'm a lifer, I'm a lifer. And then Suave comes up to me, and Suave says, first of all, he was like, yo, I'm from the South Bronx, man. I'm from the South Bronx. And I'm like, brah. No, I did not say bro. But I said, oh my God, Suave, that's so cool. I love the South Bronx. It's one of my favorite neighborhoods. It's so misunderstood. And then he said, look, I was really moved by your speech. I'm going to be in here for life. I'm a juvenile lifer, which means he's not just there for life. He was put there as a juvenile. Yeah. We need to let that sink in, right?
Yeah, like how old was he?
He was 17. He had just turned 17 when he was sentenced to life without parole. That meant he was not coming out unless it was in a coffin.
Yeah.
Period, dot, end of story. So he says, what should I do? I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. And I was like, oh my God, become my eyes and ears. Journalists can't get in, but now you can be my source. You can tell me everything that's happening. And you can actually be the voice for the voiceless. Now, that is a concept I don't use anymore. I don't believe people are voiceless. I believe that they are not heard, but that they always have voice. But at that time, I used that notion. And I said to him, be the voice for the voiceless. And those few words transformed Suave's life. Up until then, he had been a rabble-rouser. He was breaking all the rules. He was fighting, et cetera, et cetera. He walked in illiterate at 17. He tries 7 times to get his GED. He does. He enrolls in college at Villanova, takes 16 or 17 years to get his bachelor's degree. He becomes an activist. He becomes a leader inside the prison, and his life transforms. Now, throughout all of this, Can
I just back up for 1 second? How long had he been in prison when you met him first?
So 93, less than a decade.
Okay, and had he done any of this effort to get his GED, to get it? No. So all of that good stuff happened after you guys met. So before that, he was just sort of living his life in there a bit wayward.
He was causing trouble. It wasn't that he was a bit wayward. He was causing trouble.
He was
on
actually
purpose.
causing trouble. Okay. And so after you met, it's when, like, literally that's when he went to get his GED. That's when he started to do all this good stuff.
Yeah. It's like hard to believe, but it is true.
Yeah.
Suave, to go back a moment, you have to remember, I come into the prison, I meet Suave with my husband. My husband meets Suave with me in the prison in 1993 in that prison auditorium. And I'm a Christmas card lady. We would take the picture of ourselves and put it in the Christmas card and send it out to family and friends. We were newlyweds. He had met my husband. I started sending Suave Christmas cards because I'm a journalist, but I'm also a human. And there was I wanted to maintain a relationship with him because I did always think there's going to be a story someday. I don't know when, but he's going to be there for life. Something's going to happen. And also, I want him to know that someone on the outside has not forgotten him. That I know his address and that I'm going to put a Christmas card in the mail to him because he met my husband. And so that's actually a big part of episode 1 because people are like, wait, what? You were sending a guy convicted of murder, sentenced to life without parole, Christmas cards? I'm like, yeah. And we can talk more about that because I actually think that this is an important tool in the journalist's tool belt. And then you just fast forward. Like, I did not go see Suave all the time. I think in the 31 years, well, let's say in the first 25 years that he was in, I went to visit him as a journalist to report on him twice or three times. And I went to an invitation, like luncheon inside the prison, twice or three times. So that would be a total of 6 times that I saw Suave during 31 years. So it wasn't like I was going every week. And there were 7 years when Suave didn't call hardly at all because he was in solitary confinement.
He was there for 7 years.
In solitary confinement.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically what happens is that all of this then ends up in the Supreme Court.
What sort of was going on that either for you or for Suave or for both of you to think, I can be part of this man's life enough to keep in touch with him, to help him? Like, because by the time he leaves, you're there to pick him up. So something had shifted, right? There was a point where and was it just journalistically? Like, what was going on in your life and his life that allowed you to realize, you know what, I'm going to pick him up?
Can I hug you? Oh my God. Well, first of all, when the Supreme Court makes this decision, that's when I start recording.
Okay.
Okay, because I'm like, oh, wait a second. Like, the Supreme Court is ruling about a case just like Suave's, who I have known since 1993. Even if he doesn't get out, it's a story.
Yeah.
Because why doesn't he get out? I just knew. I was like, we have to start recording. He was the one who was saying, hey, Maria, this is what's happening. Because I was busy, right? I'm covering other stories. I wasn't necessarily watching what was happening with juvenile lifers. This was not a big story for me. So Suave was the one who would call and say, it's moving in the Supreme Court. They did this, they did that. And that's when I said, I have to start recording. And I mean, of course I had to be there when he got out because I had been recording everything up until that point. And that's captured in season 1. Like, Suave, when he sees a horse, he pets a horse for the first time.
Yeah.
He sees a cat.
He flies on a plane.
Yeah, he flies on a plane. All of these things. You have to remember, he went in 1980, 86, por ahí. It was a very different country.
Yeah.
He had never used an iPhone, et cetera, et cetera. So I absolutely was going to be there. I was going to be there to witness something like this. I'm a journalist at my core. I wore a poncho. I wore a leopard skin poncho. I know. What can I tell you? But underneath it, I had my recorder. And so I was like, I am recording this moment. This is historic. I just knew it as a journalist that it was historic. And maybe it was going to turn out to be just a 5-minute piece on Latino USA. Again, people are going to be like, well, were you friends? And I'm like, this was really... I was emotionally connected to witnessing a human being who had been confined for 31 years to come out. Like, you can't not be emotionally connected to this. But I was also like, wow, as a journalist, I am witnessing and covering something that, like, who's done this before? This particular case of juvenile lifers released because of the Supreme Court. So there was deep journalistic motives, but you can hear me. I'm really happy when Suave gets out.
Yeah.
And when he gets sick in the car ride to Philadelphia because he hadn't been in a car in 31 years, yeah, of course I'm going to be patting his back. Like, of course, because I'm a journalist, but I'm a human being. I'm a mother. And as a journalist, I want this person to know that I care. Because if you care, I say, you actually deliver better journalism.
Of course, yeah. I've had this conversation with many people on this show that I'm not sure where the idea that objectivity turned into not caring.
Correct.
Right? And right and wrong is still something that can exist to a journalist. That doesn't actually take away your sense of objectivity. And recognizing that a child shouldn't be sent to prison for the rest of their life, even for something as horrible as killing somebody, is a legitimate decision to be made. So you do start to stay in touch with Suave. You aren't in the same city, right?
No. I'm in New York City. I'm raising kids, and he's about 90 minutes outside of Philadelphia.
Right. And what's his life like in that first couple of years that he's out?
I mean, I think it was a combination of fascination, excitement, joy, coupled with states of panic, deep insecurity, having to learn how to be a full-fledged adult when you're almost 50. Because you have to remember, Suave goes in when he was living in his mother's house. He had never written a check to pay rent. He had never had to pay a phone bill, an electric bill. He had never had to essentially cook for himself, create a space. And also the biggest issue, right, which is that Suave is he free? I don't know. Yes, he's free. He's outside, but he is serving with lifetime parole. Yeah. And you are not free if you are on lifetime parole. You are not free. It's like you're walking around with invisible handcuffs, but they're right there. What do I mean? If Suave jaywalks, he could be taken and put back in prison. If he has any kind of altercation with the police, raising his voice at a police, could be taken back to jail. Is caught drinking or smoking a joint, could be taken. All of these things, all things that we do all the time, he cannot do. So I don't know. I think here's what's happened. My brain is so clouded by what's happened in the last 4-5 years of Suave being free, that those early days now feel like a long time away.
Yeah. And
the big question again is, does everything resolve itself once you're out? And it's like, no.
I am really, really, really afraid to get stopped by the police. The minute they stop you and they find out you're on parole, you're getting handcuffed, now your car getting searched. And if you don't report that traffic stop to parole, it's a violation of your conditions and they could lock you up.
No. I mean, it's interesting. He kept saying he was institutionalized, eh? Like he really was struggling with sort of the lack of structure that the outside world, even with the parole hanging over his head and the check-ins have, it was still hard for him.
I mean, I just can't imagine what that's like, not to be called your name, to be called by a number.
Yeah.
To have to wake up at any time of the night and be, completely upright in order to be counted, taking a shower with your underwear on. These things that we don't think about and then there's much more profound. And this is, unfortunately, to bring it straight up to the present, is what has me so concerned about not only this country, the United States, but the world, right, which is an increasing sense that the carceral state is the solution, right, that just opening more prisons, imprisoning more people, in this case, detaining immigrants who have no criminal record at all, that somehow this is good for our society. This is what has me profoundly worried these days.
You mentioned early on that you weren't friends when you started, but you do develop this sort of friendship that also includes something you don't want, but you admit that you sort of become a bit of a mother figure for him. And that ends up becoming kind of problematic for you guys, doesn't it? As like Suave, the 50-year-old, starts to grow up.
Yeah, this is, I was not expecting this to happen. I was not expecting this. But what I love is that what we're doing with the Suave podcast is we're doing like the best journalism possible. It truly is documentary and investigative because we're staying with the story. And we're going to the parts where it's kind of ugly.
It really is some of the rawest tape I've ever heard.
Oh my God, I'm telling you, girl, when I listen to it, right, and I've been a part of it throughout, but then the producers take over, and I I try to keep my editorial at a distance because I'm part of the story.
Yeah.
I understand that. If anything, I'm the person who says, if I sound bad, that's okay. People need to hear that. They need to know what it sounds like when it's not pretty. Suave needed me, and I was there in whatever way he needed me. And then Suave kind of stopped needing me, and there was a distance there, and I didn't understand this. Again, you have to remember Suave was in a prison for 31 years. So exterior human relations, power dynamics, people being interested in taking advantage of him. All of these things are things that Suave didn't know because he was dealing with a different societal dynamic where, frankly, in the prison, Suave was the man.
Yeah.
He ran the prison. But then he comes out and from a distance, because I also was not hovering. And in fact, in my role as a journalist, I have never told Suave what to do ever, because that is an ethical line that I'm not going to cross. But essentially, Suave stops calling. Other people kind of appear in his life, and he, like a young person, is kind of like, oh, they're cooler than you. I mean, I'm simplifying a lot.
Yeah.
But basically, this creates a situation for me that I was not expecting, because I don't have any of this kind of experience with my friends or my husband or my kids. It was very weird, to be honest with you. But again, very raw, very honest. And I told my producers, I was like, you guys, this is like a serious telenovela, except that it's all real.
Yeah.
All real.
One of the most sort of dramatic parts of the whole story was when Suave gets his car stolen. And that is sort of also like a point where the two of you kind of hit a bit of a crossroads.
This is happening in Suave's life right now while we are in the middle of producing Suave Season 2. I mean, Suave is a very public person. He's about to do this publicly all over his social media.
So, Suave, you are certain then that you will be taking action to come public on this in the next 24 hours?
Well, let me say this, right? I appreciate the conversation from the bottom of my heart, but I'm only doing this because Maria asked me not to go public at the time I wanted to go to. At the end of the day, I'm going to defend myself, regardless of what the circumstances may be. If I got to go back to prison, fuck it. That's what it's going to be. I'm not no nut. I'm not no sucker. I'm none of that. I'm none of the above.
Suave, what do you think it's going to look like when you go public?
I'm using everything I got. I'm using my Facebook, Instagram, everything. Trust me, it's going to be a shitstorm for somebody. See, because at this point, it's not even about a fucking car no more. It's not even about a car.
Oh my God, this was terrifying. I'm just so glad that Suave and I have this very weird relationship in that we record every single phone call. I record every single phone call. So I'm glad that even throughout his essentially mental breakdown that we witness and document, he allowed me to keep on recording. He never said stop recording. And that's why I'm so thankful to Suave, because he is an extraordinary, and I will use the word, patriot of the United States, to have allowed me to record what happened with him, because it's very, very, very powerful. I can just tell you it was frankly terrifying. And I, at that point, actually began to understand, this is a big part of season 2, right? That I also needed to have a deep look at what was happening here, because I was like, you know what? I think Suave is going to end up back in prison.
Can you tell us a little bit of that story? Just sort of back it up just a little bit.
It essentially comes down to this. If you are on lifetime parole, you are, again, walking around with invisible handcuffs. That means that if somebody punches you in the face, you can't punch them back because you're handcuffed invisibly. That means if somebody assaults your girlfriend, you cannot come after this person because you have invisible handcuffs on. That means that if somebody steals your car, you can't, and they refuse, and the police are not taking it seriously, and the people refuse to get it back, and you know who they are, you can't go and step to them because you have handcuffs, invisible handcuffs. And Suave had a breakdown because he was like, if they can take my car, anything can happen to me out here on the street. He said multiple times, when I was in prison, I was so much the man that nobody would even come and steal an oodles of noodles from my cell because they knew there would be hell to pay if you took Suave's soup. But on the outside, they took his car and he could do nothing. And this was driving him crazy. I mean, honestly, literally driving him crazy.
I mean, he was threatening, right? Like, that was the scare. I just want to make people understand that the thing that scared you was that he wanted to go after. He knew who had stolen his car and he wanted to go after them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He wanted to show and talk about institutionalization. So Suave needed to show who had the power in the power dynamics. It had to be him. Nobody disrespects Suave in this way. That is very much a kind of prison life. Also street life. In the end, there is resolution and it's powerful and spiritual. And the resolution for me also helped me to understand why I was doing this story in the first place. Because I was like, I can't lose myself. I can't lose my emotional stability. I can't lose my husband or my kids, my family, because of what's going to happen with Suave.
Yeah.
If Suave ends up back in prison, my whole family is going to have a cow, right?
Because it was affecting. I mean, you tell this really interesting story about your son telling you sort of the impact that it had on him, right? Can you tell us that?
I don't even, it's I'm not going to lose it. But when I think back about it, yeah, my son, at one point we were talking about Suave. My son is 29 now, but he said, Mom, there were times when I was growing up that Suave would call in the middle of us having a conversation about something. And I'd be like, what? He said, yeah, I'd be talking to you about something important that was happening in my life, Mom. And Suave would call and you would take Suave's call. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's these moments that, again, that like some people would say, well, that's your family. It's human. It's humanity. It is a human response that I have to have to my son, who is saying, you made a choice here. And by the way, my son is a working journalist.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. But
he understands it all, but that's a deep cut.
We've all done it. I was an exec of a daily flagship current affairs show for years. And when I finally left it, my kid said to me, the phone was always beside you and conversations were always stopped for the phone. And I thought I was good at separating the two, but you're not. You get sucked in and you can't help it. And your brain just is never going to let that go. And so I can imagine when you have a story and a person like Suave who just, it's really life and death situations with him, right? That he would pull you away, of course. But it's hard as a mom to be a mom and a good journalist. How is Suave doing now?
Well, in general, I would say Suave is great. I would say that Suave has settled in many ways. I would say that he understands his demons more clearly. It's not that they are not there. And by the way, it's not that they don't come out. They continue to come out. When I least expect it, it's like Suave will shut down, have an attitude, whatever. But don't we all? Mm-hmm. We're just so much more hyper-conscious with Suave.
So I don't think we've actually said it. Suave was charged with killing a fellow child from his neighborhood, and he was with another person when that child was killed and shot. And you sort of indicate at one point that maybe he actually wasn't the one that killed the kid. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like, was Suave in prison for all those years for a crime that he might not have even committed?
Yeah. And that's the big drama that happens in season 1 is because here's what you need to understand, and your listeners need to understand, right? Is that when you are speaking with someone in prison, for example, you actually don't get on the phone and talk about their case in every phone call. So I was actually not talking to Suave about his case. Even when I went to interview him, it was not about his case. It was about conditions. It was about the activism. It was about this. And Suave never said to me, look, there's some weird stuff that happened with my case. All I knew was that he had been offered a plea deal and that he didn't take it. If he had taken the plea, he would have been out probably in 5 or 10 years. He didn't take the plea deal because he insisted he was innocent. And he gets sentenced to life in prison without parole. We did not talk about this stuff. We just didn't. That was the way I dealt with him. And it was the way in which, well, because again, I've had people in prison. I know that, you don't just talk about the case. Anyway, what happens in season 1, and he was not expecting this, is that we did deep investigative work in his case. My producers, Maggie Freeling and Julieta Martinelli, pulled all of the paperwork, made all of the phone calls, did all of the research. And in fact, there is one document that comes out that basically says that Suave did not pull the trigger. And he basically, when we take him to where it all happened, that's when it's kind of the breakdown of like, it wasn't me. And I lose my shit, to be honest with you, at that point. So what I don't understand is why you're not pissed off, though. Like, in all the years that we spoke, you never...
I live by the code of the street.
Yes, but...
Right? And even today...
But I'm asking you a particular question. I'm not... Stop
pissed
with...
off at what? Pissed off at what? I want to know why should I be pissed off at?
Pero por Dios, are you kidding me?
I want to know what I'm supposed to be pissed off at.
Oh, that you were charged with murder, that you were sentenced to life without parole.
Listen.
And then you serve all that time and you're just like, no, well, I'm going to, apologize and contrition. But never once the fucking street code put me in prison and I almost fucking died there. I'm fucking pissed off. I'm pissed off now.
I talk about it, but I'm not even mad. You know why? Because I fucking transformed my life.
I completely lose it because you were in there, but you're not guilty. I mean, how do you even process that? Again, that is a lot of what season 1 is about, is coming to terms with this, because that was the street code. That was the street code. He was going to take
a hit,
the
isn't
hit.
it?
Ugh. And then for him to say, because you're not mad? Like, you're not mad? In fact, Suave took full responsibility in front of the judge. He said, I have to take full responsibility. So he did a 180 in the sense that, if you're in the presence of a crime and you don't stop it, then you too are guilty. And I think he had to really sit with the moral pain and spiritual pain of a kid losing his life in his presence.
Yeah, and he does.
Yeah. And that still weighs on Suave, no doubt.
What did Suave teach you all these years later? What did the process, what do you sort of feel like shifted in you over the time?
No one has asked me that question, so I'm a little bit like, oh. Well, I think there's 2 elements to it. So I think there's the journalistic element. What did he teach me? And journalistically, what I have learned through the Suave experience is to trust my gut as a journalist and to fight for my stories. Mm-hmm. And to never give up on a story that you believe needs to be told, because in your core, you can tell that there's a deep injustice. I don't think I understood it clearly, but the notion of a child being sentenced to life without parole is profoundly unjust. So that the whole Suave story, again, I had to, even within my own company, I had to fight for people to believe that there was a story here to be told. That's because none of them knew Suave. He wasn't calling them. He was calling me.
Yeah.
So, as a human being, what has Suave taught me? I think patience. Like, in many ways, Suave has taught me that absolutely anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. And so that's like a really beautiful lesson to learn from a human being that you've actually just watched. So, we have this multiple layered relationship now. And it's good. I'm very thankful. The first thing I did as soon as I finished listening to the entire binge, before it came out, I picked up the phone and I called Suave and I just said, bro, thank you, man. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting us do this. Thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for being honest. And so, he's taught me a lot of grace as well.
Lovely. Well, Maria, thank you for this. And thank you for the work. It's your work. It's amazing work. And so thank you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Love you, Canada. Love you, Kathleen.
Thank you. Crime Story is hosted by me, Kathleen Goldhar. Our producers are Nikki Manfredi and Hadil Abdelnabi. Sound design by Evan Kelly. Sound sourced from Futuro Studios' podcast series Suave, Season 1 and 2. Our senior producer is Jeff Turner, our video producer is Evan Agard, and our YouTube producer is John Lee. Executive producers are Cecil Fernandez and Chris Oak. Tanya Springer is the senior manager of CBC Podcasts, and Arif Narani is the director of CBC Podcasts. Thanks for listening to this episode of Crime Story. And if you enjoyed my conversation with Maria, you might just enjoy one I had with a journalist named Connie Walker. She joined me to talk about her podcast, Trouble in Sweetwater. It's about her investigation into the crisis of policing one of the U.S.'s largest Indigenous reservations. You can find the link to that conversation in our episode description.